there with the Mexican people, and he married one. And her name was Refugio Jones, Refugio Flores. And so they had several children, of which my mother was one. And, no, but I have to go back. Now, the one that came from England was my great-grandfather. Then of his children, after he married, he had several children, and one was called, what is Theo, my grandfather's name?
Theo Alejandro?
No, it's Jones.
It's William or Robert?
William or Robert?
No.
No, sorry.
He loved the Mexicans so much. Now, he was the son of the one from England. And he joined the cavalry in Mexico. So he was El Capitán Guillermo Jones.
Okay.
Now, Jones in Spanish, they pronounce it Jones. So he was a captain in the cavalry of the Mexican army. And when he died, he said, he died in Laredo, and he said, I don't want my body to be anywhere but on Mexican soil. So then his body had to be carried from Laredo to Nuevo Laredo. And of course he was a big military man, so he was being high honors with the military in Mexico. And I happened to see his grave when my grandmother died, because when his wife, my grandmother, died many years later, he said, I want to be buried in Nuevo Laredo, where my husband is buried, El Capitán Jones. So then my husband and I went to the funeral, and we went from Laredo to Nuevo Laredo, and you are not going to believe this. They had a chain about this big holding up something. So they undid this chain, this padlock, and opened my grandfather's grave. He had been dead many, many years. And it was covered with marble 4 inches thick. Marble this way, that way, and that way. In marble. So then my grandmother's coffin was laid down. By that time, I guess there was nothing left of my grandfather's grave. But I want you to know that here was this grave lined with marble, white marble, 4 inches thick. And so she was buried there.
Interesting. I never heard of
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
A lady told me that the children that she knew of that lived here in this building were tutored.
Were you tutored when you lived in this building? How were you taught?
In this building?
Yes. When you were young, how were the children taught here that were growing up? Was there a school, or did someone come here to teach?
As I remember, I came here, as I told you, as a grown-up after I was teaching in Edinburgh. I was under contract with the Edinburgh school system, and every summer I would come and spend the summer here with, by that time, Margarita was married to Gomez. But Berta and I were good friends, and we had lovely times together. I was a few years older than she was, but we spent the summers here, and that's all I can say.
But you don't know how in the days before that, did the children have tutors, or was there a school close by?
What I remember that Tia Maria would dress Philip and Albert, my brother, with their clean shirts and their clean pants, and send them to school. And there was only one school that I can think of I was very little and I didn't care. But it was Sister Loretta. Evidently it was a Catholic school because Sister Loretta was the teacher. And Philip and my brother came to that school.
And you followed them, didn't you?
What?
You followed
I
them to
followed
school.
them. I wanted to be one of them.
And you didn't get very far, did you?
No. Yeah, Maria went and got me back.
Okay, I have written down here the stories you told me this week. That every Saturday you would have a bath and get your hair, all the children would have a bath, get their hair combed, and come downstairs to the store. But you already told them that with your 20 centavo coin. Then you would go home for a nap.
Oh, every Saturday, Theo Juan, now Theo Juan was my father's oldest brother, and he had 3 children, Juan Jose, Alfonso, Enriqueta, I don't remember the name of the girl. She was very wealthy, but she didn't want anybody to see her. She would call the car company, the Cadillac company, said, I want a pink catalog at my door.
Cadillac.
So a pink catalog would be delivered.
Cadillac.
Who is going to meet us? Nobody will meet you. You just leave it there. You will get your check by mail. So that's the way they brought the pink catalog. They set it in front of her house. But that was long after Theo Juan was dead. But he had left him a lot of money, I imagine. And so the money for the pink catalog would go by mail to them.
What about when Theo Juan would take you all to the bay?
Oh, when we were little and we lived with Tia Maria in her house, every Saturday, Theo Juan would go to Tia Maria's house and said, I came to get the children. And he would have a stout stick and a knife. And Tia Maria would line us all up. There was Philip, Lydia, and Sarah, Albert, and me. Line them all together, and Theo Juan would walk us to what it was between Point Isabel and what was it? That the Alamias lived on a ranch.
I don't have that written. But it was on the bay, huh?
It was on the bay. And he would walk us to that part of the bay where they called it a picacho. So there was this big oyster bed, lovely oysters this big, shells that big. And he would say, all right, everybody sit down. You're going to get one by turn. So, of course, the boys were first. You would pick up one, open it, and give it to one of the boys and to the other boys.
And they would eat them.
And then to the rest of us, right off the shell, right there. And nowadays, we're afraid of having no oysters because we'll get poisoned.
Well, nowadays we will.
We certainly will.
Not in those days.
There was not all that what we have nowadays.
Yeah.
We used to slurp them.
Yeah. They didn't need ketchup or chili sauce, did they?
But then on Saturdays, we would go to Brownsville. Now, Friday morning, we had to lay newspapers on the floor and polish our shoes. Every one of us said, beware that you don't get one spot of polish on my floor that Petra just scrubbed. So we put newspapers and polished our shoes. Then we had our bath in a tin tub like that. Tia Maria bathed us each one. And then on Saturday afternoons, all starched and all dressed up, there was an electric motor that came right here in front of the store. There was an electric
motor car.
A motor car. And this would pick us up and take us to Brownsville. And we would spend the weekend in Brownsville with Tia Teresa and Theo Frank. And then on Sunday evening, we were returned back to Port Isabel.
And it was on a track? It ran on a track?
It ran
Like
on
a train?
Right in front of this store, right in front like that. And then there was a little house where they sold the tickets. And we got on the motor. They called it the motor. It was an electric thing.
She says there wasn't a train, though.
No, it was just one car. Very elegant, very nice. And we went to Brownsville that way for the weekend. Then we'd come back on Sunday, the same way that we came. But I don't remember where it turned forward or, because in Edinburgh, you don't know, in Edinburgh, we would go forward this way and then back up, back up the wrong way.
And where would you stay when you were in Brownsville for the weekend?
With Tia Teresa, she had a lovely home.
What street was that?
Madison.
Okay, tell them about when you and Tio Beto made your first communion and all the cakes that Tia Maria made.
Well, in 1914, Tia Maria called my father, or wrote my father, and told him that he wanted Albert and me to come to stay at her house so they could teach us the prayers so that we could make our first communion. So then my father sent us to Tia Maria, so they taught us the prayers, and on June 10, 1914, we had our first communion.
Now, what was the priest's name, Mother?
He was a Frenchman, and his name was Father Evo. I-V-O.
Evo. I-V-O.
Yes.
And what did Tia Maria make?
Oh, she made, poor thing, now that I'm a grown-up person and you saw all this niceties, I think, poor Tia Maria, what she had to go through. She had a little old iron stove like that had been her mother's. And it was, since they lived in the salt country, there were pock marks this big where you could see the fire of the stove in there.
From the salt
Can you
air.
picture what I'm telling you? The iron was corroded, yes, to that extent. And she made 7 beautiful cakes to wait for all the cousins from Brownsville were coming over. Theo Frank Champion, it was Rosa, Anita, and Eufemia, and Tia Petra, and Tia Teresa, and all of them came for the celebration because the children had their first communion. So they had a big party, and she had all those cakes that she had made.
What church did you make your first communion in?
At that time, there was a wooden church close to the bay. And the cemetery, the people were buried right close. In those days, people were buried close to where the church was. Now when I read, I'm a great reader of that sort of thing. And in England, they used to have the cemeteries close to the church. So that's the way they had it here too. And so we made our first communion in that little church. Now they have, I know that they have a big church somewhere close, far from where it used to be.
They were oblates at that time. Father Eagle was an oblate, wasn't he?
He was an oblate priest?
I have no
I don't know
idea.
if the French were,
I know that he was French.
the French were oblate? Or the oblates were French? Yes.
Do you happen to recall the name of the church?
I don't know what order he was.
Do you remember the name of the church?
No, I don't. But I got a beautiful certificate like that.
I wish we still had it. But what about Tio Jose, Tia Maria's brother? That was something about salvavidas.
Well, Tio Jose was the father of Philip